The scent of salt and ancient earth was the first thing to greet Elara as her car crunched over the gravel drive. A welcome change from the exhaust fumes and hurried rush of the city she'd left behind. Blackwood Manor rose from the autumnal landscape like a dream half-remembered, a grand, imposing edifice of dark grey stone, its windows reflecting the bruised twilight sky. The wind, a wild, untamed thing, whispered through the skeletal branches of the oaks that framed the drive, carrying the distant murmur of the sea. She'd sought refuge here, a temporary escape from the relentless demands of her architectural firm, and perhaps more accurately, from the quiet hum of dissatisfaction that had begun to permeate her meticulously ordered life. A commission for a historical restoration project had brought her to this remote corner of Cornwall, a sprawling estate far removed from the sterile minimalism she usually designed. It was meant to be a palate cleanser, a reconnection with the raw, untamed beauty of the past, before she dove back into the sleek, modern lines of her future. Switching off the engine, the sudden silence was profound, broken only by the wind's low sigh and the rhythmic crash of waves against unseen cliffs. A shiver, not entirely from the cold, traced its way down her spine. Blackwood Manor wasn't just old. It felt à la veine, imbued with centuries of stories and secrets. A tall, slender woman, she unfolded herself from the car, her long dark coat whipping around her legs. Her auburn hair, usually pulled back in a severe knot, had escaped its confines during the long drive, tendrils framing a face that was usually composed, but now held a flicker of anticipation. She took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp, briny air, and for the first time in months, felt a stirring of something akin to wonder. The heavy oak door, studded with iron, swung open almost silently as she approached, revealing a dimly lit foyer. A stout, kindly woman with silver hair pulled into a severe bun emerged from the shadows. "Miss Vance? I'm Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper. Welcome to Blackwood Manor. We've been expecting you." Her voice was warm, tinged with a local burr. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," Elara replied, her voice a little softer than usual. "It's magnificent?" The housekeeper smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "It has its charms, doesn't it? Come in, dear. The fire's lit in the drawing room and there's tea ready." Elara stepped inside, and the door closed with a soft thud, sealing her away from the fading light and the wild wind. The air within the manor was warm, scented with wood smoke and beeswax polish, a comforting embrace after the raw chill outside. The foyer was vast, with a grand staircase sweeping upwards into the gloom, and antique tapestries depicting hunting scenes adorning the walls. Everything spoke of faded grandeur, of a history that pulsed just beneath the surface. Mrs. Gable led her through a series of dimly lit corridors, past closed doors and towering portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her until they reached the drawing room. It was a cavernous space, yet made cozy by a roaring fire in a massive stone hearth. Deep velvet armchairs and sofas were arranged invitingly, and a low table held a silver tea service, delicate china, and a plate of freshly baked shortbread. "Make yourself comfortable, Miss Vance. Your luggage has been taken up to your room, the East Wing Suite. You'll find it has the best views of the gardens and the sea." Mrs. Gable bustled about, pouring tea. "Mr. Thorne will be joining us for dinner later. He's usually quite punctual." Elara's brows furrowed slightly. "Mr. Thorne?" She hadn't been informed there would be other occupants. Her understanding was that the manor would be mostly hers for the duration of her stay, save for the staff. "Julian Thorne," Mrs. Gable clarified, handing her a steaming cup. "He's the owner's grandson. He usually resides in London, but he's here to oversee some arrangements. A lovely young man. Don't you worry. He keeps to himself mostly, but he's quite charming when he chooses to be." A hint of amusement played on the housekeeper's lips. Elara took a sip of the fragrant Earl Grey. "I see." A faint tremor of unease, quickly replaced by a spark of curiosity, ran through her. A charming, reclusive grandson. This was a layer of complexity she hadn't anticipated. After tea, Mrs. Gable insisted on showing her to her suite. The east wing was a labyrinth of polished wood, and hushed silence. Elara found herself in a spacious bedroom, dominated by a four-poster bed, draped in heavy forest green velvet. A large window offered the promised view. Manicured gardens, now skeletal and stark in the twilight, leading down to a glimpse of the turbulent grey sea. A small sitting area, a dressing room, and a luxurious bathroom with a clawfoot tub completed the suite. She unpacked slowly, her movements deliberate, savoring the quiet solitude. Her design sketches and notebooks were laid out on an antique writing desk, ready for inspiration that felt closer now than it had in years. The thought of Julian Thorne, however, lingered in her mind. Who was he? This enigmatic grandson who kept to himself, but was quite charming. She usually preferred her solitude unburdened by unexpected company, yet a part of her was undeniably intrigued. As dusk deepened into night, Elara showered, letting the warm waters sluice away the last vestiges of her journey. She chose a simple, elegant black dress, its soft fabric clinging just enough to hint at her figure, and added a delicate silver necklace. She wanted to appear professional, composed, even if her insides were humming with an unfamiliar blend of curiosity and nervous excitement. When she descended the grand staircase, the manor seemed to have transformed. Candles flickered in sconces along the walls, casting dancing shadows and lending an ethereal glow to the vast spaces. The scent of a savory stew wafted from the direction of the dining room. As she approached the drawing room, she paused, hearing the low murmur of a voice within. It was deep, resonant, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Refined, yet with a subtle edge of something wild, untamed. Taking a steadying breath, Elara pushed open the heavy door. He stood by the fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, gazing into the flames. He was taller than she'd imagined, with broad shoulders that strained slightly against the dark fabric of his tailored jacket. His hair was dark, almost black, falling in a controlled disarray over his forehead. As the door creaked, he turned slowly, and her breath caught. His eyes were the color of storm-tossed seas, a piercing, intense blue-gray that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed facade. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a gesture that was both welcoming and subtly predatory. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice even richer up close, a velvety sound that seemed to wrap around her. "Julian Thorne, welcome to Blackwood Manor. I trust Mrs. Gable has settled you in comfortably?" "Mr. Thorne?" Elara managed, her voice a little huskier than she intended. She felt an immediate, visceral pull, a sudden awareness of her own body, of the space between them. It was unsettling, exhilarating. "Yes, thank you. The manor is breathtaking." He took a step towards her, his gaze unwavering, and extended a hand. His fingers were long, elegant, and when they clasped hers, a jolt, like static electricity, passed between them. His skin was warm, firm. "Please, call me Julian, and you must be Elara." "Elara?" she confirmed, trying to ignore the lingering warmth in her palm after he released her hand. She noticed the subtle scent that clung to him, something woodsy and sophisticated, with a hint of something feral, like damp earth after rain. "I apologize for the lack of warning regarding my presence," Julian said, gesturing towards a velvet armchair. "My plans shifted unexpectedly. I hope my being here doesn't disrupt your work." His tone was polite, but his eyes held a glint of challenge, as if daring her to say it did. "Not at all," Elara lied smoothly, settling into the armchair opposite him. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the slight curve of his lips. There was a scar, barely visible, just above his left eyebrow, adding a touch of ruggedness to his otherwise aristocratic face. "I'm sure we can coexist without issue." He chuckled softly, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the quiet room. "I'm sure we can. What brings an acclaimed architect like yourself to a crumbling old ruin like Blackwood, if I may ask?" "Hardly a ruin," Elara countered, a defensive spark igniting. "It's a magnificent historical property, full of character, and I'm here to assess its structural integrity, research its history, and eventually, oversee its restoration." "Ah, a noble pursuit. Julian murmured, taking a sip of his drink. To breathe new life into old bones? I confess, I've always preferred the untouched decay to the polished perfection, myself. His gaze drifted from her to the ornate ceiling, then back to her, a slow, appraising journey. There's beauty in both, Ilara argued, feeling a strange need to defend her profession, her aesthetic. To preserve the past while adapting it for the future, that's the challenge. Indeed. His eyes held hers, and for a moment, the air crackled with an unspoken current. And what kind of future do you envision for Blackwood, Ilara? The question hung in the air, weighted with more than just the manor's fate. It felt personal, probing. One that honors its history, but allows it to live again, she said, choosing her words carefully. To be a vibrant home, not just a museum. A vibrant home, he repeated, a thoughtful expression on his face. Yes, I suppose it could be. It needs a firm hand, though. Blackwood has a way of resisting change. Mrs. Gable appeared then, announcing dinner, and breaking the spell that had fallen between them. Julian rose with an effortless grace and offered Ilara his arm, a gesture so old-world it startled her. Her fingers brushed the warm wool of his jacket, and the subtle scent of him, that unique blend of earth and refinement, enveloped her. The dining room was even grander than the drawing room, with a long mahogany table set for two. Candlesticks cast a warm glow on the polished wood, illuminating gleaming silver and crystal. It felt intimate, almost impossibly so for two relative strangers. Dinner was a surprisingly pleasant affair. Julian was a captivating conversationalist, knowledgeable about art, history, and current affairs. He spoke of his travels, of ancient cities and remote landscapes, with a dry wit and an understated passion that drew her in. He listened intently when she spoke of her work, asking insightful questions that revealed a sharp mind beneath his languid charm. Yet, beneath the polite conversation, an undeniable current flowed between them. His gaze often lingered, a slow sweep over her face, her hands as she gestured, the curve of her throat. She found herself acutely aware of his every movement, the way his dark hair fell across his brow, the subtle flex of his jaw as he chewed. The easy confidence with which he held his wine glass. So, Ilara, he said, leaning back in his chair as Mrs. Gable cleared the main course, are you enjoying your solitude, or do you find the quiet oppressive? Neither, she admitted, swirling the last of her red wine. It's a different kind of quiet than I'm used to, a deeper one. It feels expansive. Expansive, he echoed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. An interesting choice of word. Do you find inspiration in expansion or in constraint? Both, she mused, feeling herself relax into the conversation, drawn in by his intelligent probing. Constraint forces creativity, pushing boundaries you didn't know existed. But expansion, that's where new visions are born, where you allow yourself to dream without limits. He watched her, a thoughtful expression on his face, and then a slow, sensual smile spread across his lips. Dreaming without limits, he repeated, his voice dropping to a low purr. A dangerous, exhilarating prospect, wouldn't you say? The double meaning hung in the air, thick and palpable. Ilara felt a flush rise to her cheeks, a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. She met his gaze, refusing to look away, and saw a flicker of something raw, untamed, deep within his storm-colored eyes. Perhaps, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. But isn't danger often where the most exquisite beauty lies? Julian's smile widened, a silent acknowledgement of their shared understanding. Indeed, Ilara. Indeed. Mrs. Gable returned with dessert, a delicate apple tart, warm and fragrant. The domesticity of the moment clashed with the electric tension humming between them, making it even more potent. After dessert, they retreated to the drawing room, where the fire had been replenished. Julian poured them each a digestive, a rich, dark brandy that warmed her from the inside out. They spoke of books, of art, of the wild Cornish coast. The hours slipped by, blurring into a comfortable, yet intensely charged, intimacy. Ilara found herself sharing more than she intended, speaking of her quiet yearning for something beyond her meticulously structured life. The feeling that she was on the cusp of a significant change, though she couldn't articulate what that change might be. Julian listened, his gaze never leaving her face, his presence a comforting, yet undeniably thrilling, anchor. Finally, a glance at the ornate grandfather clock in the corner revealed the late hour. I should retire," Elara said, the words feeling clumsy on her tongue. The thought of leaving the warmth of the fire, and more importantly, the warmth of his presence, felt strangely jarring. Julian rose with her, his tall frame suddenly looming over her. The scent of him, the brandy, the wood smoke, filled her senses. "Of course," he said, his voice softer now, a hint of something unreadable in his tone. "It's been a long day for you." He walked her to the foot of the grand staircase, the only light coming from the flickering candles. The shadows stretched long and danced around them, creating an intimate cocoon. "Thank you, Julian," Elara said, turning to face him. "For dinner, and for the company." "The pleasure was entirely mine, Elara," he replied, his eyes dark and unreadable in the dim light. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment, then gently cupped her jaw. His thumb brushed lightly over her cheekbone, sending a shiver through her. The touch was feather-light, yet it seared her skin. Her breath hitched in her throat. She could feel the warmth of his hand, the slight roughness of his skin. Her gaze was locked with his, lost in the depths of his storm-grey eyes. The air between them thrummed with unspoken desires, with a dangerous, exhilarating promise. "Sleep well, Elara," he murmured, his voice a low caress, his thumb still stroking her cheek. His eyes dropped to her lips, lingering there for a heart-stopping moment, before slowly, reluctantly, pulling his hand away. Elara could only nod, her mind a dizzying whirl. She turned and began to ascend the stairs, her hand gripping the polished banister for support. She didn't look back, but she could feel his gaze on her, a physical presence that followed her up the winding stairs, through the silent corridors, and all the way to her suite. Once inside her room, she leaned against the closed door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her cheek still tingled where he had touched her. The quiet of her room, once comforting, now felt empty, echoing with the memory of his voice, his touch, his gaze. She walked to the window, gazing out at the moon-drenched gardens, the silvered expanse of the turbulent sea. Blackwood Manor, with its ancient stones and whispered secrets, felt less like a refuge now, and more like a prelude. A dangerous, exhilarating prelude to something she hadn't known she was waiting for. And Julian Thorne, with his storm-grey eyes and intoxicating presence, was undeniably at the heart of it. She wondered if he was still standing at the foot of the stairs, or if he too was gazing out at the moon, perhaps thinking of her. The thought sent another shiver through her, a delicious tremor of anticipation. Sleep felt like a distant, impossible concept. Tonight, the whispers of Blackwood Manor were not just of the wind and the sea, but of something new, something awakening within her. She wondered if he was still standing at the foot of the stairs, or if he too was gazing out at the moon, perhaps thinking of her. The thought sent another shiver through her, a delicious tremor of anticipation. Sleep felt like a distant, impossible concept. Tonight, the whispers of Blackwood Manor were not just of the wind and the sea, but of something new, something awakening within her. The wind, a relentless artist, continued its wild symphony against the ancient stones of Blackwood Manor, but now there was a different note woven into its desolate melody. It was the hum of her own pulse, a vibrant, insistent rhythm that thrummed beneath her skin, resonating with every creak of the old house, every distant crash of the waves. She rose from the window, the moonlight painting her silhouette in silver, and began to pace. Her silk nightgown, a whisper against her skin, felt both luxurious and utterly inadequate. The chill of the manor seeped into the very marrow of her bones, yet an opposing heat pulsed through her veins, a fiery counterpoint to the storm outside. Her mind replayed the brief, potent exchange with Julian Thorne. His voice, a low rumble, like distant thunder, had resonated deep within her chest. His eyes, the color of a tempestuous sea, held a depth that both intrigued and unsettled her. She found herself yearning to plumb those depths, to understand the secrets they held, the stories they promised. This was not merely attraction. It was a gravitational pull, an undeniable force that felt ancient and predestined. She paused by the door, her hand hovering over the cold brass knob. The silence of the upper floor was profound, broken only by the wind's mournful cries. Below, she imagined, the great hall would be cloaked in shadows, perhaps a dying ember in the vast fireplace, casting fleeting spectral shapes across the ancestral portrait. Was he still there? Was he as restless as she? The thought, daring and dangerous, propelled her forward. She had never been one to shy away from curiosity, and tonight, curiosity was a raging inferno, demanding to be fed. Her bare feet made no sound on the thick, worn carpets as she glided through the dimly lit corridor. The air grew colder with each step away from her room, carrying with it the scent of old wood, sea salt, and something else, a faint masculine aroma that was distinctly Julian. It was the scent of expensive pipe tobacco, leather, and something wild, like the forest after rain. It drew her onward, a silken thread through the labyrinthine manor. The grand staircase loomed before her, a majestic spiral into the shadowy depths. Moonlight, now struggling through the heavy clouds, barely pierced the gloom, leaving the balustrade in deep relief. As she descended, her hand trailing lightly on the polished wood, the whispers of the house grew louder. They were not malevolent, but rather a chorus of forgotten lives, echoing the grandeur and solitude of Blackwood. At the foot of the stairs the great hall stretched out, vast and silent. The embers in the fireplace, just as she'd imagined, glowed like a single watchful eye. But it was not empty. Silhouetted against the dying firelight, a figure stood, tall and unmoving, gazing into the flames. Julian. Her breath caught in her throat, a tiny gasp swallowed by the vastness of the room. He hadn't heard her, or if he had, he gave no indication. He was lost in thought, his profile sharp and angular against the flickering light. A glass, half filled with a dark liquid, rested on the mantelpiece beside him. She hesitated, a sudden shyness washing over her. What was she doing? Wandering the manor in her nightgown, drawn by an inexplicable pull towards a man she barely knew. It was reckless, imprudent, utterly unlike her. And yet, she couldn't retreat. The magnetic force that had pulled her from her bed now held her captive, rooted to the spot. As if sensing her presence, he slowly turned. His storm-gray eyes, even in the dim light, seemed to pierce the shadows, finding her instantly. There was no surprise in his gaze, no question. Only a profound recognition, as if he had been expecting her all along. A slow, knowing smile, barely a shift of his lips, touched his mouth. Couldn't sleep? His voice, still low, now held a new tenderness, an intimacy that wrapped around her like a warm cloak. No, she managed, her voice a soft tremor in the quiet hall. The storm, and the house, it's all rather stimulating. She felt a flush creep up her neck, heat blooming on her cheeks. He chuckled, a rich, resonant sound that vibrated through the floorboards. Stimulating indeed. Blackwood has a way of getting under one's skin, doesn't it? Especially on a night like this. He gestured to the armchair opposite the fireplace. Come, warm yourself. The chill penetrates even these thick walls. She moved towards him, a strange blend of apprehension and exhilaration coursing through her. As she drew closer, the scent of him grew stronger, that intoxicating mix of earth, spice, and his unique masculine essence. It was a primal scent, one that spoke of strength and untamed wilderness, and it stirred something ancient within her. He watched her approach, his eyes never leaving hers, a silent question in their depths. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, with the weight of shared glances and lingering thoughts. When she reached the fireplace, he didn't move away. Instead, he remained close, his presence a warm, solid wall beside her. The heat from the dying embers was welcome, but the heat emanating from him was far more potent, far more consuming. Whiskey, he offered, nodding towards the glass on the mantelpiece. It helps with the chill, and the stimulation. A hint of mischief danced in his eyes. Perhaps just a small one? She replied, her voice still a little breathless. He reached for a decanter on a small table nearby, its crystal glinting dully in the low light. He poured a measure into another heavy glass, his movements precise and unhurried. As he handed it to her, his fingers brushed hers. It was a fleeting contact, barely a touch, yet it sent a jolt through her, a delicious electric current that shot straight to her core. Her gaze met his, and in that instant, the world seemed to narrow, encompassing only the two of them, the flickering firelight, and the endless roar of the sea outside. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She took a tentative sip of the amber liquid. It burned, then spread a slow, comforting warmth through her chest. He settled into the armchair, his long legs stretched out towards the fire. She remained standing, a little overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment, by the sheer magnetism of him. "You look ethereal," he said, his voice dropping to a murmur. "Like a moon goddess, descended from the heavens into this old earthly hall." A blush deepened on her cheeks, and she instinctively pulled the silk closer around her, suddenly acutely aware of the thinness of her nightwear. "You flatter me, Mr. Thorne?" He smiled, a genuine, open smile that softened the sharp angles of his face. "Julian, please, and I assure you, I speak only the truth." His eyes lingered on her, tracing the curve of her neck, the slope of her shoulders, the delicate line of her collarbone beneath the silk. It was a gaze that felt both intimately possessive and deeply respectful, a dangerous combination that thrilled her to her very core. She found herself unable to look away, caught in the hypnotic pull of his gaze. The silence stretched between them, not awkward, but thick with unspoken desires. The whiskey warmed her, loosening the edges of her self-consciousness. "Tell me," she began, her voice gaining a little strength, "do you often wander the manor in the dead of night?" He leaned back, his gaze still fixed on her. "Sometimes. Blackwood has many stories to tell, and sometimes, in the quiet hours, it chooses to whisper them." His eyes flickered to the portraits lining the walls, then back to her. "And sometimes the stories are not of the past, but of the present. And the future." Her heart quickened. Was he talking about them? The implication hung in the air, a silken thread between their souls. "What stories do you hear, Julian?" she asked, stepping a little closer, drawn by an invisible thread. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving hers. "Of a woman lost and found, of a manor awakened, of a storm, both outside and within, that promises change." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "Of a connection that defies logic and demands to be explored." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. She felt a tremor run through her, a recognition of the truth in his words. She had felt it too, this inexplicable pull, this sudden, overwhelming sense of destiny. I feel it too," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "This energy, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced." He nodded, a profound understanding in his eyes. Blackwood Manor has a spirit, a powerful energy that draws certain souls to it, and when those souls meet here, under its ancient roof, amidst the roar of the sea and the fury of the sky, something extraordinary can happen. He extended a hand, palm open, towards the armchair beside him. "Sit. Let's talk about these extraordinary things." She hesitated for only a moment, then moved gracefully to the armchair. As she sank into its plush depths, the silk of her nightgown pooled around her, a luminous cloud. Julian shifted slightly, turning more fully towards her, his knee almost brushing hers. The proximity was electrifying. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the subtle, intoxicating scent of his skin and clothes. "You are not from this part of the world, I gather," he stated, though it was more of an observation than a question. "No, I'm from the city, London," she confirmed. "Blackwood is quite a departure." He smiled. "A departure, yes, but perhaps a welcome one?" She considered this. More than welcome. Necessary, perhaps. The city's clamor had begun to feel stifling. She looked around the vast, shadowed hall. Here, There's space. And silence. And a different kind of sound. The sound of your own heart, perhaps, he suggested, his voice soft. Almost a caress. Her breath hitched. He saw through her, directly to the core of her being. Perhaps, she admitted, her voice a little shaky. And the sound of possibilities. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment, then gently took hers. His touch was warm, firm, and infinitely comforting. His thumb slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to stroke the back of her hand, a delicate, feather-light caress that sent shivers down her arm and spread through her entire body. Possibilities, he echoed, his gaze locked with hers. Blackwood is ripe with them, and so I suspect are you. The sensation of his touch, combined with the intensity of his gaze, was almost overwhelming. Her pulse throbbed beneath his thumb, a frantic drumbeat against his skin. She found herself leaning into his touch, a silent invitation, a desperate yearning for more. And you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. What possibilities do you seek within these walls? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low, husky register that vibrated through her. I seek connection, understanding, a kindred spirit in this wild, beautiful isolation. His eyes delved into hers, searching, revealing. And perhaps something more profound than mere companionship. His thumb continued its slow, mesmerizing dance on her skin, and she felt herself melting into the moment, into his presence. The world outside, the storm, the distant city, all faded away, leaving only the two of them, bathed in the soft glow of the dying fire, surrounded by the whispers of Blackwood. And if you were to find such a connection, she prompted, her voice trembling slightly. He brought her hand to his lips, a slow, deliberate movement that made her heart leap into her throat. His gaze never left hers as his warm lips brushed against her knuckles, a soft, lingering kiss that sent a wave of heat through her. Then I would cherish it, he murmured, his breath warm against her skin, and explore every facet of its beauty. I would let it consume me, and I would surrender to its power. He released her hand, but the warmth of his touch lingered, a brand against her skin. The intensity of the moment was almost unbearable. Her senses were heightened, alive. She could hear the frantic beating of her own heart, the soft crackle of the embers, the faint, distant roar of the sea. The air between them was thick with unspoken desire, a tangible force that pulled them closer, magnet to magnet. You speak poetically, Julian, she said, her voice a little breathless, her gaze still trapped in the depths of his storm-grey eyes. He smiled, a slow, captivating curve of his lips. Perhaps Blackwood inspires it, or perhaps you do. The compliment, delivered with such sincerity and intensity, made her entire body tingle. She felt utterly exposed, yet strangely safe, cherished even. This man, with his quiet power and mesmerizing gaze, saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else ever had. He reached out again, this time his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her jawline. His touch was firm yet tender, sending a fresh wave of exquisite sensation through her. Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, savoring the feel of his skin against hers, the warmth radiating from his palm. You are a vision, he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her ear as he leaned closer, a beacon of light in this shadowed house. Her eyes opened, meeting his. He was so close now, she could feel the heat of his breath on her lips, see the flecks of silver in his storm-grey eyes. The scent of him, that intoxicating blend of pipe tobacco, leather, and wild forest, enveloped her, drawing her deeper into his orbit. The romantic tension was a palpable thing, a silken cord tightening around them both. She could feel the subtle shift in the air, the silent question hanging between their lips. Her own lips parted slightly, a silent invitation, a desperate longing. He leaned in further, his gaze dropping to her mouth, then back to her eyes, seeking permission, asking a silent question that needed no words. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage. Every instinct screamed Yusky. "Julian," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, her eyes wide, full of a yearning she couldn't hide. He closed the small distance between them, slowly, deliberately. His lips, warm and firm, met hers in a tentative, yet deeply passionate kiss. It was a kiss that began as a whisper, a gentle exploration, a soft pressing of mouths, then deepened, slowly, exquisitely, into a hungry promise. She responded instantly, her hand rising to cup his jaw, her fingers tangling in the soft hair at his nape. The taste of him was intoxicating. Whiskey, warmth, and something uniquely Julian. It was everything she had imagined, and infinitely more. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them, her body pressed against his, the thin silk of her nightgown, no barrier to the heat that flared between them. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more demanding. His tongue traced the line of her lips, a soft invitation she gladly accepted, parting her mouth to him. Their breaths mingled, ragged and sweet. The embers in the fireplace seemed to glow brighter, mirroring the fire that had ignited within her. The world outside the manor, the storm and the sea, faded into a distant hum, irrelevant to the universe of sensation that now consumed her. His hand, which had been on her waist, now slid upwards, tracing the curve of her spine, sending shivers of delight through her. He pulled away slightly, just enough to gaze into her eyes, his own eyes dark with desire, yet still holding that profound tenderness. "You are exquisite," he breathed, his voice husky, his thumb gently caressing her lower lip, still swollen from their kiss. "Absolutely exquisite." She could only gaze back at him, lost in the depths of his eyes, her mind a whirlwind of sensation and emotion. This was more than a kiss, it was a revelation, a profound connection that transcended words. It was the awakening of something new, something ancient, something that Blackwood Manor, with its whispering winds and roaring sea, had carefully orchestrated. He leaned in again, his lips brushing hers, a feather-light touch that promised more. "This is just the beginning," he murmured, his voice a silken thread against her ear. "The beginning of our story here, within these walls." Her breath caught, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his chest. She closed her eyes, savoring the moment, the scent of him, the feel of his body pressed against hers, the intoxicating promise of his words. The whispers of Blackwood Manor now sang a new song, a melody of desire and destiny, and she was utterly, irrevocably, lost within its beautiful, dangerous notes. The night was still young, and the storm, both outside and within, was far from over. His lips, which had just spoken such potent truths, now claimed hers with a newfound urgency, a silent symphony taking root where words had ended. It was a kiss that deepened instantly, a hungry seeking, a desperate affirmation of the promises unspoken and the desires uncontainable. Her fingers, already tangled in the soft hair at his nape, tightened, pulling him closer still, as if to meld their very souls. His hands, firm and warm, slid from her waist, tracing the delicate curve of her spine, pressing her flush against the hard planes of his body, until there was no space left between them. Only the pulsing rhythm of two hearts beating as one. The scent of him, rich earth, old books, and something uniquely masculine, vital and dark, filled her senses, intoxicating her. She tasted the storm on his lips, the wildness of the night, and the sweetness of a longing finally given voice. Her own breath hitched, a soft moan escaping as his tongue tentatively, then boldly, explored the velvet warmth of her mouth, intertwining with hers in a dance as old as time itself. Every nerve ending in her body hummed, alive and aware, awakened by his touch, his taste, his sheer proximity. The world outside, with its raging tempest, faded into a distant roar, overshadowed by the storm building within her, a tempest of yearning and fire. He broke the kiss, only for a breath, his forehead resting against hers, his eyes dark and fathomless, even in the dim light, searching hers. A raw, untamed passion flickered in their depths, mirroring her own. "Amelia," he murmured, her name a rough caress on his lips. A plea and a promise all at once. It was the first time he'd spoken her name with such intimacy, and it sent a shiver, both exquisite and profound, through her. "Look at me," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, and she did, allowing her gaze to drown in his. "I feel everything," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, a tremor running through her. "Too much." A corner of his mouth tilted in a faint, tender smile. "Not too much, my dearest. Just enough. And there is so much more to feel." His thumbs stroked the tender skin just beneath her ears, sending delicious jolts down her spine. He then lifted her, effortlessly, into his arms. A gasp escaped her lips, quickly stifled against his shoulder as she instinctively wrapped her legs around his waist, her body fitting against his, as if crafted for that very purpose. The sudden movement was exhilarating, a wild plunge into the unknown. She felt the powerful flex of his muscles beneath her, the steady strength that held her aloft, secure and cherished. He began to move, carrying her through the softly lit corridor, the floorboards creaking a gentle protest beneath his weight, a quiet accompaniment to the furious drumming of her heart. The destination was clear, though unspoken. Her room. The very sanctuary he had led her to earlier, now to be transformed. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to a soft glow, casting dancing shadows on the walls, painting the elegant space in hues of amber and deepest rose. The rain lashed against the windows, a rhythmic percussion against the glass, and the wind howled like a mournful spirit, but within these walls, a different kind of magic was unfurling. He set her down gently beside the four-poster bed, but his hands remained at her waist, holding her close, not letting her step away. His gaze swept over her face, lingering on her eyes, her lips, as if memorizing every detail before the true unveiling began. The desire in his eyes was a palpable thing, a tangible heat that warmed her from the inside out. "Let me," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. His fingers, long and skilled, went to the intricate fastenings of her gown. It was a slow, deliberate act, each button unclasped a tender liberation. The silk slid away from her shoulders first, revealing the delicate curve of her collarbones, the pale skin beneath. She shivered, but not from cold. It was the exquisite anticipation, the knowledge that each layer of fabric shed was a step closer to him, to the raw intimacy that beckoned. His eyes followed the descent of the fabric, a silent reverence in their depths. As the gown pulled at her feet, leaving her standing in her slip, her breath caught. She felt vulnerable, exposed, yet utterly safe under his unwavering gaze. The slip, a whisper of lace and satin, clung to her curves, a thin barrier between them. He reached out, his hand tracing the delicate lace at her neckline, his thumb brushing the soft swell of her breast above the fabric. A faint gasp escaped her, her body arching involuntarily towards his touch. "Beautiful," he breathed, the word a reverent prayer against her lips as he leaned in to kiss her again, a soft, lingering kiss that promised deeper pleasures. This kiss was different, less urgent, more tender, a slow exploration that sought to soothe her apprehension while igniting a deeper fire. His hands moved to the straps of her slip, sliding them down her shoulders. The fabric pooled around her waist, a silken waterfall. She stood before him, clad only in her delicate chemise and stockings, the firelight painting her skin in hues of gold and rose. He knelt slowly, gracefully, his eyes never leaving hers, and with a gentle touch, he began to roll down her stockings, his fingers brushing against her calves, her ankles, sending sparks of sensation through her. When they were shed, he rose, drawing her back into his embrace, his body now pressing against hers, with only the thin linen of his shirt and breeches separating them. "Now you," she whispered, her hands already reaching for the buttons of his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly as she worked them free. The fabric was fine, soft, and beneath it, she could feel the hard warmth of his chest, the taut muscle that promised strength and protection. Each button she undid revealed more of him, the dark hair dusting his chest, the powerful breadth of his shoulders. The scent of him grew stronger, more intoxicating, as she uncovered his skin. He stood patiently, his eyes burning into hers, allowing her to take her time to explore. When the shirt was fully open, she pushed it from his shoulders, her hands gliding over his warm skin, feeling the smooth expanse of his back, the sculpted lines of his arms. He shrugged it off, letting it fall to the floor with a soft sigh. Then, his gaze still locked with hers, he reached for the fastenings of his breeches. The deliberate slowness of his movements was almost unbearable, a delicious torment that heightened her own desire. He shed them along with his boots, in a practiced, fluid motion. Now, he stood before her, powerful and magnificent, clad only in his undergarments. The firelight played over the lean planes of his body, the strong columns of his legs, the defined muscles of his chest and abdomen. He was a vision of masculine grace, raw and breathtaking. She felt a primal stir within her, a deep, ancient recognition of him as her mate, her destiny. He reached for her again, pulling her close, the thin fabric of her chemise, now the only barrier between their bodies. His hands found their way beneath the hem, his fingers brushing the bare skin of her waist, then sliding upwards, tracing the delicate curve of her ribs, seeking the soft swell of her breasts. She gasped, her head falling back against his shoulder as his touch sent a wave of pure sensation through her. He leaned down, his lips trailing a path of fire along her neck, over her collarbone, until he reached the pulse throbbing at the base of her throat. He lingered there, teasing, tasting, drawing soft moans from deep within her. "My Amelia," he breathed, his voice a low, guttural murmur against her skin. "You are more beautiful than any dream." With a gentle push, he guided her backwards onto the bed. The mattress yielded beneath her, soft and inviting, a nest of down and linen. He followed her down, his body a warm, heavy weight against hers, propping himself on his elbows above her, his gaze devouring her. He reached for the ribbon that held her chemise together, and with a slow, deliberate tug, it came undone. The fabric parted, revealing the pale curve of her breasts, the dark apex of her nipples. She felt a blush creep up her neck, but his eyes held only adoration, a burning hunger that promised to consume her. His hand reached out, tentatively at first, then with more confidence, to cup her breast. His thumb brushed over her nipple, and she arched into his touch, a sigh escaping her lips. His head dipped, and his mouth found hers again, a hungry, passionate kiss that stole her breath and her will. His tongue danced with hers, mirroring the primal rhythm that was beginning to pulse through her veins. His other hand traced the line of her hip, then slid lower, past the soft swell of her stomach, to the juncture of her thighs. Her body instinctively tensed, then relaxed, melting into his touch. He sought the warm, secret place between her legs, his fingers brushing against the delicate folds of skin, igniting a fiery current that spread rapidly through her core. She gasped, her hips instinctively rising to meet his touch, a desperate plea for more. He broke the kiss, his eyes still dark with desire, his breathing ragged. "Are you ready for me, Amelia?" he whispered, the question a gentle demand, a plea for her permission. She could only nod, her voice lost in the rush of blood in her ears, her body trembling with an exquisite ache. "Yes," she managed, the word barely audible. "More than ready?" He leaned down, his lips finding her ear, whispering promises, words that were lost in the storm outside and the storm within her. His hand continued its gentle exploration, teasing, stroking, bringing her closer and closer to the precipice of sensation. Each touch was a revelation, each stroke a deeper plunge into a world she had only dreamed of. Her senses were overwhelmed. The scent of him, the feel of his skin against hers, the sound of his ragged breathing, the taste of passion on her lip. He shifted, rising slightly, and she felt the hard, hot press of his arousal against her. A shiver ran through her, a a thrill of fear and anticipation. He looked into her eyes, seeking reassurance, and she gave it to him. Her gaze unwavering, filled with trust and longing. "Let me love you, Amelia," he murmured, his voice husky with raw emotion. With a slow, deliberate movement, he began to part her legs, easing himself between them. Her body was ready, aching for him, open and welcoming. She felt the first tentative press, a soft stretching, a delicious fullness that made her gasp. He waited, allowing her body to adjust, his eyes watching hers, searching for any sign of discomfort. There was none, only a desperate need, an overwhelming desire to be one with him. Then, with a deep breath and a powerful, smooth thrust, he entered her. A cry escaped her lips, a sound of pure sensation, a blend of exquisite pain and overwhelming pleasure. She arched her back, her fingers digging into his shoulders, her body molding itself around his. He filled her completely, a profound sense of rightness settling over her. Their bodies moved together, instinctively, driven by a rhythm as ancient as the earth itself. The storm outside raged, mirroring the tempest within, the crashing waves against the shore, finding their echo in the powerful surge of their passion. He moved slowly at first, allowing her body to adjust, his gaze fixed on hers, a silent communication passing between them. Then, as she wrapped her legs tighter around him, as she met his thrusts with her own rising hips, the pace quickened. Each stroke was deeper, more urgent, pulling her further and further into the swirling vortex of sensation. She clung to him, her nails raking lightly down his back, her head thrown back, her hair fanned out on the pillows. The world narrowed to this bed, this room, to the feel of his body against hers, the sound of their mingled breaths, the scent of their heated skin. Her mind emptied of everything but the overwhelming flood of pleasure, building, cresting, threatening to engulf her. She felt herself spiraling, losing control, nearing the edge of an unknown precipice. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice raw, and she opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. In their depths, she saw her own wild abandon, her own fierce joy, magnified and reflected. It was a moment of profound connection, of souls laid bare, of two people becoming irrevocably entwined. He drove into her one last time, deep and true, and the world exploded. A wave of pure, incandescent pleasure crashed over her, shattering her into a million exquisite pieces. Her body convulsed, sensations rippling through her, electrifying every nerve. She cried out his name, a primal sound torn from the depths of her being. He followed her, his own body tensing, a guttural groan escaping his lips as he found his release within her, a warm, pulsing torrent that bound them together, even more intimately. They lay tangled together, breathless and spent, the storm outside still raging, but within the room, a profound calm had settled. His head rested beside hers on the pillow, his breath warm against her ear, his arms still wrapped tightly around her waist, holding her close against his damp skin. Her fingers, still intertwined with his hair, gently stroked the soft strands. The fire in the hearth had died down to glowing embers, casting a soft ethereal light across the room. The rain continued its steady patter against the windows, a gentle lullaby now, rather than a furious roar. She felt utterly exhausted, yet incredibly alive, reborn. Her body hummed with the afterglow of their passion, a delicious ache that promised more. He kissed her temple, a soft, tender gesture that spoke volumes. "My Amelia," he whispered, his voice still thick with emotion. "I knew you were the one. I knew it the moment I saw you." A tear slipped from her eye, a tear of pure happiness, of overwhelming gratitude. She had never felt so seen, so desired, so utterly cherished. Blackwood Manor, once a place of mystery and shadowed secrets, now felt like home, a sanctuary built not just of stone and wood, but of shared breath and interwoven destinies. The whispers of the house were no longer just echoes of the past, but the living, breathing promise of a future, a melody of love and longing that had finally found its harmony. She turned in his arms, resting her head on his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. It was a rhythm that now felt irrevocably linked to her own. The night was far from over, and the story of Blackwood Manor, and of them, had only just truly begun. The storm had brought them together, and now in its wake, a new dawn promised to break, filled with untold possibilities, and a love that felt as ancient and enduring as the manor itself. She closed her eyes, utterly content, utterly lost in the beautiful, dangerous notes of their destiny. A soft, silvery light, the harbinger of a hesitant dawn, began to filter through the heavy velvet curtains, painting streaks across the opulent room. Eliza stirred, a languid stretch of limbs that brushed against warm, solid muscle. She opened her eyes slowly, the world coming into focus as a hazy, golden-gray masterpiece. Her head was nestled in the crook of his shoulder, his arm a secure weight around her waist, drawing her flush against his broad chest. The rhythmic beat of his heart, which had lulled her to sleep, was still her anchor, a steady, comforting drum against her ear. She looked up, her gaze tracing the strong line of his jaw, the faint stubble that gave him a rugged charm, even in slumber. His dark hair, tousled from their passionate night, fell across his forehead. He looked utterly peaceful, a stark contrast to the fierce intensity he'd shown hours before. A tender smile touched her lips. This man, Lord Alaric Blackwood, was a mystery she was only just beginning to unravel, and every thread she discovered felt more exquisite than the last. As if sensing her gaze, his eyelids fluttered, then slowly lifted. Dark, deep-set eyes, the color of rich earth, met hers. A slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes, and the warmth in his gaze enveloped her, making her heart bloom. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly caress that sent a shiver of pleasure through her. He tightened his hold, pulling her even closer. "Or is it still night? I lost track." Eliza chuckled, a soft, sleepy sound. "I think it's morning. The storm has passed." He sighed, a sound of deep contentment. "And brought us together." His fingers traced the delicate curve of her spine, sending delicious tremors through her. "Did you sleep well, my enchantress?" "Better than I've ever slept," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "Safe, cherished." She paused, then added, "Loved." The word hung in the air, a fragile, beautiful thing, testing the boundaries of their nascent connection. Alaric's eyes darkened, and his thumb gently stroked her cheekbone. "Loved," he echoed, his voice raw with feeling. "Yes, Eliza, loved." He leaned down, his lips brushing hers, a feather-light touch that promised so much more. "I don't know how or when, but you have woven yourself into the very fabric of my being. Like Blackwood Manor, you feel ancient and enduring, yet utterly new." His words, so profound, so unexpected, brought a lump to her throat. She deepened the kiss, pouring all her burgeoning feelings into it, the surprise, the joy, the intoxicating sense of belonging. His lips were soft, warm, tasting of sleep and passion, and his kiss deepened in response, growing more urgent, more possessive. His hand slipped from her back to cup her nape, drawing her closer until there was no space left between them. The kiss was long and languid, a slow dance of discovery that rekindled the embers of the night. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, their eyes shining with a shared intensity. I should probably get dressed," Eliza whispered, though her body betrayed her, pressing further into his warmth. Alaric's smile was teasing. "Why rush? The world can wait." Blackwood Manor has a way of slowing time, of making the outside world feel distant, unimportant. He began to trail kisses along her jawline, down the sensitive curve of her neck, making her shiver with delight. "Stay here with me a little longer. Let us savor this new dawn." And she did. She had no desire to leave the sanctuary of his arms, the cocoon of their shared intimacy. They lay there, talking in soft murmurs, learning more about each lives, their hopes, their fears. He spoke of the manor's history, of his family's long lineage, of the solitude that had been his constant companion until her arrival. She, in turn, shared snippets of her own life, of her work, of the quiet yearning she hadn't realized she harbored until it was filled by him. Hours seemed to melt away like snowflakes in the sun. Eventually, the sun was higher, streaming golden through the now parted curtains, illuminating dust motes, dancing in the air. The scent of pine and damp earth, carried on a gentle breeze, drifted through an open window. "Hungry?" Alaric asked, his stomach rumbling in protest. Eliza laughed, a genuine joyful sound. "Starving. I haven't eaten since yesterday afternoon." They rose, a comfortable awkwardness giving way to a shared smile as they navigated the morning after rituals. Alaric found her clothes, which had been neatly folded and placed on a nearby chair, a testament to his earlier thoughtfulness. While she dressed, he moved with an easy grace, pulling on a silk dressing gown that accentuated his broad shoulders and lean frame. He led her downstairs, his hand warm and strong in hers. The manor in the morning light seemed to exhale a sigh of relief after the storm. The grand hall, which had felt imposing the night before, now exuded a dignified elegance. They found their way to a sun-drenched breakfast nook, overlooking a sprawling rose garden, still glistening with dew. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth, chasing away the morning chill. A housekeeper, a kindly woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, bustled in, her eyes twinkling as she saw them. She offered a warm smile, clearly unfazed by her lord's unexpected guest. A lavish breakfast appeared as if by magic: fresh fruit, warm pastries, eggs, bacon, and steaming coffee. They ate slowly, savoring the food and the quiet communion. The storm had left behind a world reborn, fresh and clean. Outside, the gardener was already assessing the damage, and the sound of distant birdsong filled the air. After breakfast, Alaric took her on a tour of Blackwood Manor. "It's more than just a house," he explained, his voice imbued with a deep reverence. "It's a living entity, steeped in generations of dreams and memories." He showed her the vast library, its shelves groaning with ancient tomes, the air thick with the scent of old paper and leather. He pointed out family portraits, their eyes seeming to follow them as they passed. He revealed hidden passages and secret alcoves, each discovery deepening her fascination with both the manor and its master. In the drawing room, bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun, he played a melancholic, yet beautiful, piece on the grand piano, his long fingers dancing across the keys. Eliza sat on a plush velvet settee, mesmerized not only by the music, but by the raw emotion etched on his face. This was a man of depths, of passions, hidden beneath a veneer of aristocratic reserve. Later they wandered into the gardens, still damp but vibrant. He plucked a half-opened rose, its petals a velvety crimson, and tucked it into her hair. His fingers brushed against her temple, and she shivered, not from cold, but from the electric current that always seemed to spark between them. "This is all so breathtaking," Eliza said, her voice hushed. "It feels like stepping into another world, another time." Alaric turned to her, his gaze intense. "It is. And you, Eliza, feel like you belong here, as if you've always been part of its story, part of my story." The words were a direct challenge to the dangerous notes of their destiny she'd felt last night. The danger wasn't external, it was the sheer, overwhelming force of their connection, threatening to upend everything she thought she knew about her life. "But I have my own life," she began, the practical side of her mind reasserting itself, albeit weakly. "My work, my apartment, my routine." He took her hands, his thumbs tracing circles on her skin. "And I have Blackwood. My responsibilities. But what if those lives, those routines were merely waiting for this? For us?" His eyes held hers unwavering. "I am not a man to speak lightly, Eliza. What we shared last night, what I feel for you now, is unlike anything I have ever experienced. It feels inevitable." She looked into his eyes, seeing a reflection of her own confusion and hope. "Inevitable," she whispered, the word both thrilling and terrifying. It's so fast, so consuming. Love often is, he said softly. It doesn't always wait for convenient timing or measured steps. Sometimes it storms in like the tempest that brought you to my door and reshapes everything. He led her to a secluded stone bench nestled beneath a weeping willow, its branches creating a private haven. He sat, pulling her gently onto his lap, her back resting against his chest. His arms wrapped around her, his chin resting on her shoulder. The scent of him, clean and masculine, filled her senses. "What do you feel, Eliza?" he asked, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "Beyond the passion, beyond the comfort, what is it that stirs in your heart?" She closed her eyes, letting the truth rise within her. "A yearning," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "A sense of coming home. I feel seen, truly seen, for the first time, and a profound joy, a joy that frightens me because it feels so fragile, so precious." He squeezed her gently. "It's not fragile if we nurture it, if we choose it." He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face, his gaze searching hers. "I want to choose it, Eliza. I want to choose you. I want to wake up with you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to explore every secret of this manor with you, and every secret of your heart. I want to build a life here, with you, within these ancient walls that have finally found their missing echo." His sincerity, his raw vulnerability, touched her to her core. It wasn't just a physical desire, though that burned fiercely between them. It was a soulful connection, a recognition of kindred spirits. The dangerous notes were not of peril, but of the profound courage it took to embrace such an all-encompassing love. "Alaric," she breathed, tears welling in her eyes. I want that too, more than I thought possible." He smiled, a triumphant, joyous smile that transformed his aristocratic features into something utterly radiant. "Then let us make it so." He kissed her then, not with the hungry urgency of their first desperate embrace, but with a deep, tender certainty. It was a promise, a vow whispered on their lips, sealed with the brush of skin, the taste of forever. His hands moved from her face to her back, pulling her closer, until her body molded against his, a perfect fit. The sun dappled through the willow leaves, painting shifting patterns on their intertwined forms. The birds sang, the roses bloomed, and Blackwood Manor seemed to hum with an ancient approval. The storm had cleared the air, not just outside, but within their hearts. It had swept away doubts and uncertainties, leaving behind a clear, beautiful landscape where love could take root and flourish. They spent the rest of the day exploring the grounds, talking, laughing, planning, dreaming. They spoke of visits to the city, of her continuing her work, of making Blackwood Manor a home for them both, a place where their individual lives would intertwine and enrich each other. The practicalities, which had seemed so daunting just hours before, now felt like exciting challenges to be met together. As evening approached, casting long purple shadows across the gardens, they found themselves back in the library. Alaric had lit a fire, its warm glow dancing across the spines of old books. He poured them both a glass of port, its rich, dark color mirroring the deepening twilight. Eliza sat beside him on a leather armchair, leaning her head on his shoulder, utterly at peace. The day had been a whirlwind of emotion, a testament to the transformative power of connection. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the storm, for the twist of fate that had brought her to this place, to this man. "To us," Alaric said, raising his glass, his eyes shining with a quiet joy. "To us," Eliza echoed, clinking her glass against his. The sound was soft, resonant, like a bell tolling the beginning of a new, beautiful era. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close, and she nestled into his side, feeling the steady beat of his heart. The dangerous notes of their destiny had resolved into a symphony of love, a melody that promised passion, companionship, and a lifetime of shared dawns and dusks within the embrace of Blackwood Manor. It was a story that had truly begun, not with a tempest, but with the quiet, enduring promise of two hearts, irrevocably linked, finally finding their way home. She closed her eyes, utterly content, utterly lost in the beautiful, harmonious notes of their shared future. The night was no longer just a night. It was the threshold of forever.